Mr. Kelly, since the implementation of the Paycheck Protection Program last April, 38 Planned Parenthood affiliates applied for and received $80 million in taxpayer funds meant for small business relief. Pursuant to the longstanding affiliation rules, which stipulate that affiliated organizations are to be considered as one organization, SBA found and concluded that the Planned Parenthood was ineligible for PPP funds and sent letters to each of the 38 organizations who wrongfully received funds and asked for the money back. Despite nearly 2 months of waiting, the SBA provided updated PPP data to this committee only yesterday morning, just one day before this hearing. While combing through this data, though, we find that while 7 affiliates did return their funds last year, the rest fraudulently, at least according to the SBA determination, received the full amount requested. This includes 2 Planned Parenthood organizations who have recently received a second draw loan, each within the last month. These approvals come long after the SBA sent letters concluding that the Planned Parenthood affiliates clearly were ineligible for the first draw of PPP and should return any funding they received. In your testimony today, you said that you place holds on people who were ineligible the first time, and that's supposed to protect and prevent them from getting a second draw. Mr. Chairman, I ask for consent to enter 2 letters from the SBA into the record on their determination of Planned Parenthood affiliates being ineligible. Without objection. My question, Mr. Kelly, is has the Biden SBA reversed the long-standing application of affiliation rules in an effort to make Planned Parenthood eligible for first and second draw loans? And how do you explain giving second draw loans to organizations that were initially told they were ineligible for first?
So the first answer is no. To your first question, no, we are not changing any rules related to affiliation. And with respect to the issue on the 2 loans, I'll have to get back to you on the specific instances with your committee, because obviously with over 8 million loans in the PPP portfolio, there's a lot to consider. I will say in reference to any loans that are received a second draw, there was a hold population created in the fall of 2020 by the agency under the previous administration. Those hold codes do include affiliation designations. And so without knowing more about the particular instances of the individual loans, I can't really speak to that. But I can assure you that we are following the affiliation law and will do so.
I guess my point is that there really is a significant contradiction here between people being ruled ineligible and then getting a second draw. So we really would like a very specific answer. How did 2 organizations get a second draw when they were determined to be ineligible to begin with? Because in your testimony, you did say there is a process for those ineligible to then be targeted so they can't get a second draw if we've already told them they weren't eligible for the first draw. Mr. Ware, have you conducted an investigation into the history of Planned Parenthood's access to PPP loans, particularly after the May 19th letters were sent from the Small Business Administration?
Thank you. So we are definitely aware of the concerns by you and other members of Congress regarding Planned Parenthood. As noted in our 2021 oversight plan, we intend to focus on the eligibility of loans made under PPP as a series. And regardless of the scope of that series of reviews, we will audit to the criteria relative to eligibility determinations. To date, we have not done a specific look into Planned Parenthood, but what I'm saying is that we have a whole series in terms of eligibility in which it would more likely be covered.
Well, what we'd like to do is to send this information to you that we've found of 2 of the Planned Parenthood groups getting loans a second time when they were told they were ineligible the first time, which would seem to contradict the rules that we have in place. And I hope that we can get a written response from you on that.
You will. Thank you.
Mr. Scheer, you noted in your testimony that the SBA has yet to conduct a formal fraud risk assessment of the PPP and EIDL programs. In your view, would it be irresponsible for Congress to extend these deadlines without actually having a fraud risk assessment in place?
You raise a very good question, and it's a question that really, there's a lot of trade-offs involved. There's the question of, so let me just take eligible borrowers who have played by the rules of the program and have been affected adversely by the pandemic. And the question for those borrowers, in cases where you could say we look for flags, like with data analytics, with other methods, we look for flags that could be flags for potential fraud. And the idea is for those where no flags appear, it's the question of, do you really want to stop assistance from this program to those where there aren't any flags that are being raised? There's also categories of borrowers where there might be certain flags that are raised by SBA's contractors' automated system, where they might be issues where it could be as simple as a social security number or an employee identification number being off by a digit and raising a flag. And then you have those flags that are multiple flags that might point to a higher likelihood of fraud. So there's trade-offs here, but the question there becomes one of stopping a program because the fraud risk framework and really an approach to fraud that tries to parse out and say, what, in a formal way, what is the risk of fraud in the program, and what are the biggest areas where there is that risk of fraud, and the agency coming to a determination of what its fraud appetite is in terms of just having a strategy for dealing with potential fraud. So I would point to the trade-offs involved and really to our fraud framework to begin with, which takes into account how can you make a program effective without unduly raising fraud risk.
Senator Cantwell.
Mr. Chairman, is Senator Shaheen next?
We've been using the seniority because of the WebEx. If you,
Okay.